Alright guys, I just got some great news. No in-person classes tomorrow because we're basically snowed and iced in. I won't probably be leaving that door for a while, but that means I get to make more MMA videos. So let's talk about one of my favorite subjects, Khamzat. Now, it's all still unofficial, it's unconfirmed, and I'm almost hoping it's not true. But regardless, we're going to talk about Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat and the implications of it. Specifically, the implications of if Chimaev loses to Burns. Because we have an image of Khamzat in our head, a very dominant one. I mean, it's the only thing we've seen of Khamzat. We've never seen Khamzat necessarily get rocked at all, or get taken down, or get submitted, or get knocked out, or have to push through adversity and succeed or fail. We've never seen him necessarily be in compromising positions or compromised positions. And people sort of, I feel like, especially, like I'm on the hype train. I hate that phrase, but I'm on the proverbial hype train. I love Khamzat. I'm also a big fan of Gilbert. And I feel like a lot of people who are very, very big fans of Khamzat, they sort of only have the image of him succeeding in their mind. Meaning, they can't necessarily comprehend that someone has the ability to, and possibly can, knock him out. Khamzat Chimaev can be knocked out like you or I. I feel like they don't necessarily take that into account. There's something to be said about momentum. I'm a big momentum guy. When somebody has momentum, it's very, very hard to stop them. And with such momentum, that plays into both fighters' minds. With that being said, Gilbert Burns doesn't give a fuck. He will beat the brakes off of you if you're on a 50-fight win streak or a 50-fight losing streak. He does not care. I love the buah happens. It's an interesting fight. It's very compelling. It's just, I wish we had it my way. We would have had one more fight before we got to Gilbert, and hopefully that's still going to happen. Just because you talk about the upper echelon, the top 5 of the division. It's very hard to fight somebody in the top 5 and then fight somebody below before fighting for the belt. Meaning, should Khamzat go out there and get the jump on Gilbert, he can't necessarily fight Neil Magny or Jeff Neal or even really Bilal Muhammad. Like, in my opinion, beating Gilbert, is the basic equivalent of beating Colby Covington just a step down. And it basically for me goes Kamaru, Colby, Gilbert, in that order. With that, the only person he can fight next is basically Kamaru. I mean, Khamzat could fight Colby, and that probably would be quite the compelling one. If Kamaru wants to take a break, which, why wouldn't he? Because he's been fighting his ass off. Colby versus Khamzat, should Khamzat beat Gilbert, would be very interesting. But see, I even talked myself into it. Like, this was supposed to be what if Khamzat loses, but we're all so engrossed with such the warrior and the great mentality that Khamzat has, the hard-working, I just want to fight mentality, that we can't comprehend, like, what if he loses? But what if he does? What if he goes out, fights Gilbert, and gets TKO, knocked out, lost a decision, submitted? Any of those things can happen, and not only can they happen, they're quite likely. And it's quite likely that Khamzat will do the same to Gilbert, but that's what makes it an interesting fight, and that's what makes it kind of scary, honestly. Like, it's quite the test for Khamzat, and it's quite the jump in competition, because the guys everybody that he fought in the UFC is not a scrub. First of all, the 18-second knockout of GM3, phenomenal. Fluky? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not, because it sort of seemed to work. Gerald didn't really do the right things, but it's only 18 seconds in. Not a lot that you can take out of that, honestly, other than Khamzat Chimaev has knockout power in his hands at welterweight. And even if I can't bring the other guys' names for you, it still is that they are great and skilled fighters. They're there for a reason. With that being said, we only really have a perspective of viewing of Khamzat beating up guys that he's clearly much better than. What I mean by this is, I'm going to look like Anderson Silva if I'm scheduled to fight like someone that's way below my skill. Let's say I'm fighting a kindergartner I can do, like, would never, obviously, but I could do a lot. I'd look like a hell of a fighter compared to if I fought like a real fight, like a cage fighter, who's 8-0, and me being 0-0. Like, I'm gonna look like a sack of shit. Like, I'm gonna look like I don't belong in there because I don't belong in there. What my point with that is, how the fighter looks is dependent on how you see and analyze their results from their competition. Khamzat has fought guys that are clearly worse than him, and he's looked phenomenal doing it. Can he look phenomenal fighting against guys that are at his skill level or even better than him? Like, I believe Khamzat's probably pretty good at jiu-jitsu and he's great at grappling. Is anybody here going to say that he'd be able to tap out Gilbert? Maybe. It's possible. Though unlikely. Gilbert's pretty freaking good on the ground. I'd have to say that if you're going to say that Khamzat's going to sub Gilbert, you get an interesting take. With that being said, what happens to Khamzat if he loses? Say he goes up, accepts the Gilbert challenge, and loses. What does that mean? Does that mean, oh, the hype train's off the rails? No, it just means that we found his level. Right now, we do not necessarily know where Khamzat Chimaev's skill level is. We have a general idea, given that he's fighting Gilbert Burns and nobody's like, oh, this is a mismatch for Khamzat, he's going to get destroyed, or, oh my god, this is like the Sugar Sean treatment, that's another softball for him. Like, it's seemingly pretty good. It almost seems like he already belongs in the top 5 without having really fought anybody in the top 10. But, if he loses, how much of an impact will that have on his stock? Will that cause him to retreat from welterweight? Because he looked very promising up at middleweight. And, I mean, like, with that whole grappling thing with Jack Hermanson, he was huge. He's not going to be at welterweight forever, so he's got to make hay while the sun's shining, or whatever the saying is. But should he lose to the upper echelon, that means a lot more work. That means he's got to probably fight somebody on the come-up, or somebody more in the top 5, top 10 area, and then he can work his way back up to the top echelon, to the Colbys and the Gilberts, and the Leons, and whatever. But, which was, I mean, they were even going to have, I completely forgot, they were going to do Khamzat versus Leon way back in the day. Like, that's crazy. That Leon was number 3, that he probably still is now. That's huge. And they're really pushing for Khamzat to so I would have liked a slower build, but, I mean, why not? Why not get in there? And I know there's going to be people saying, like, why are you so upset about him playing Gilbert? We want him to get to the title faster so we can see him fight Kamaru. You do, and obviously, yes, that's the end goal, but you want to make it that much more interesting. Like, if you just sort of shoot him up to the title, it's going to be a lot more compelling, or it's going to be a lot less compelling than if he's paid his proverbial dues, chopped his way through the division, earned his spot, and now he's taking on the champion, which he believes he already is. Compared to, oh yeah, I'm quite the marketing machine, I'm just going to shoot up to the top, and everybody thinks I'm going to lose to Kamaru, but we'll see, I don't know. It's much better for the fight promotion, for the fight story, and for the fighter to get that experience in the build-up. I would have liked to see a slower build-up. I understand why not, because should he stumble in there, then we got even more trouble. But seeing such a drastic shoot-up in competition is not my most favorite thing in the world. But I'll have to live with it, and even still, the fight's not official, so who the hell knows if it's even actually happening. But I just contend, and I want to know, if Khamzat loses, is this hype train over? Because a lot of people are very high on Khamzat, including myself. You wouldn't be far away from if you just went a little bit into the community and saw a lot of people think he can beat Kamaru, which is crazy. We have no frame of reference for that. There's no analytical deduction you can make and say, oh, this is why I think Khamzat's wrestling is better, that could overpower Usman, and this is why I think his striking is more, like, maybe with the striking. Regardless, Kamaru Usman's one of the greatest welterweights of all time, probably the second right now. They're closing in on first very, very fast. The number 1 pound for pound on the planet right now. So if you think that Khamzat Chimaev can beat Kamaru Usman, you're asserting that the pound-for-pound rankings are incorrect right now, and the only reason they're incorrect is because Khamzat hasn't fought somebody up in the upper echelon, and that Khamzat Chimaev is the true #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the UFC at this moment. How can you come to such a conclusion? Based on what we know. If you're behind the scenes and you've seen him spar with people, I know he's at Tiger Muay Thai now, which is awesome. That's great, because he already seemed like he had pretty good hands. He knew what he was doing. He's got a lot of knockdowns. They'll sharpen that shit up, and he'll get good clinch work as well, which will just further mold into the grappling. And it's a very, 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 very good idea. I was very happy to see that. But is it enough? Because as much as we like, that's the thing, we always focus so much on what intrigues us. Khamzat intrigues us. We don't know a lot about him. He's only had, 3, 4 fights in the UFC? 3? And boom, it's like everybody can't get enough of it. It's like the demand is sky high, the supply is super low, but the supply that we did have in the past just made the demand shoot up even more. Excuse me. But we cannot forget about his opponents, specifically in this case. We'll go with Gilbert. If you're forgetting what Gilbert Burns has done in the past 2 years, you need to check yourself. I mean, sure, Tyron's kind of a meme now, sort of fell off. Regardless, this was back when Tyron was up here. People were I remember people initially, before the pandemic, it was going to be Leon Edwards versus Tyron Woodley. And people were saying, oh, Dana really hates Leon, putting him against Tyron. That's laughable now. But Gilbert Burns, even when Gilbert Burns fought Tyron still had that aura of ex-champion, former champion. And Gilbert smashed him with it. You go into the Kamaru fight with Gilbert, he almost knocked him out 30 seconds in. I don't care that it's important, and I do care that he eventually lost. But a lot of people just sort of gloss over the fact that, Colby may be Kamaru Usman's hardest fights, but Kamaru Usman was never in more danger than when he fought Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns almost knocked him out twice in the first round. 25, 30 seconds in, big left hook, drops him. I think it was a left hook, whatever, some hook. Call it a left. Dropped him. He gets up, he stumbled, it looked like he was about to go out. I was on this very couch, in this very seat right over here, shook. I was surprised. Everybody around was like, oh my God. And he got back up, got back into it, boom, he gets hit again. He doesn't go down, but he gets hit again. And then the fight plays on, Kamaru sticks to the jab, it ends up paying dividends. But people forgot, for the first half of that first round, a lot of people thought that Kamaru was going to lose, myself included. I thought he was going to lose from the beginning, just because of the whole thing. But Gilbert Burns he may not have fought since then, but it's the recency bias, in my opinion. Recency bias coupled with the massive hype train, or whatever other acronym, or whatever you want to use for it, that Khamzat Chimaev has, makes us forget how good Gilbert Burns is. Which is why I want to shine up Gilbert here a little bit. So if Khamzat does lose, we don't have to deal with the bullshit that, he was just another fighter that the UFC put their media marketing behind. Khamzat's a great fighter, so is Gilbert. If they both fight and one of them loses, that doesn't mean the other one sucks. They're both great. This is a very important litmus test to see where Khamzat's skills are at, and it's not even official, so who the hell even knows? But when it does get announced, if it does get announced, I'll make a prediction.